So there are a lot of books and movies out there that really talk about what life might be like after an EMP, after a nuclear war. I've got a stack of them here. I got more inside. You look at different movies that are out there that talk about nuclear strikes, life after nuclear war, life after EMP, and as much as there's fiction, there's things you can learn as you're going through the book, but there are also some real world similar situations that I think we can learn from as well that we've talked about before, right? Something like major power outages, major grids downs. There's one in Venezuela we've spoken about many times, but I want to kind of talk through some of the books here, some of the ideas behind the books, and really, the idea of an EMP strike, of a major nuclear war, it's pretty horrible, right? That's the definition of apocalyptic. I understand there's multiple definitions of apocalyptic. Certainly someone will jump in the comments and say it's an awakening, and I get that, but if you look at the dictionary, there's multiple definitions of apocalyptic, and in this case we're talking about life after a major destruction type event, right? Some kind of major disruptive destruction event like a nuclear war. Certainly we would never want that to happen, but it does seem like we keep moving closer in that direction with all the wars, right? We got a lot of wars going on, rumors of wars going on, a lot of stuff going on, and we keep inching closer in those type of situations. So, of course, you've got The Road, which is Cormac McCarthy, and I'll tell you, this book is dark. This is definitely the darkest book I've got in terms of a post-apocalyptic dystopian world. They never say, and correct me, jump in if I'm wrong on this, they never really say what happened. It does seem to track the story of people trying to survive in a nuclear winter type situation. And we've already said, and there's people that have said that the idea behind nuclear winter is a bit of a fallacy, and it's not actually what people expect, the scientists expect might happen. But The Road certainly is a dark picture of a dystopian world where there's no food, or food is very hard to find, and it tracks father and son as they work their way across the country with their little shopping cart full of random stuff they can find. Very dark story. If you like the post-apocalyptic dystopian, this is certainly something you could have on your list. Don't want to give away too much. There is a movie. The movie tracks close to the book, obviously, in as much as you would expect a movie to track a book. There's a lot of stuff in the book that isn't in the movie, but it's an interesting book. It's an interesting story. It's a pretty dark future, right? They're just trying to get to the idea is the father and his son. He's trying to stick with his son, get across the country, and they're hoping to end up in a better place, right? The world they're in, where they're at, and you see the visuals in the movie, and you can read the visuals in the book of all the trees are burnt and all the animals are gone and the sky is clouded over. It's that nuclear winter idea. Nothing's growing, and they're scrambling for anything that's edible. And of course there are cannibals. There's plenty of cannibals around, because that's all that's left to eat, right, is other people, right? Other people. Not sustainable, I think, but it is what it is, and it is the story of The Road. So it's worth looking at. There isn't really, what can you learn, right? Let's try to spin a positive. What are the lessons learned here, which is nuclear war sucks. That's certainly one of the lessons. Living in a post-apocalyptic world sucks. That's also a lesson in here. Certainly at one point they do find a bunker, some prepper bunker loaded up with food. So having that prepper bunker, having those food reserves would help in that kind of situation, right? They're struggling to find food, so if you did have food and water stashed away, it's certainly better than not. But I think the moral of The Road was better not to live in a post-apocalyptic world. So I've got two others here, October Fall and One Second After. These fall into series on life after an EMP, and we've talked about EMP, electromagnetic pulse. The weapons exist and our enemies have them. Will they ever be used? I don't know, and I certainly hope not. Dipping into reality before we get into the books, They say that in the event of an EMP, a major grid down, we've lost power, lost electricity, and we're not able to restore it. Something like 90% of the population would not survive a year, right? And if you think about what not having electricity means and not having functional vehicles and gas, talking about nothing in the grocery store, no hospitals, all those kind of things, there wouldn't be a lot of people that made it. And that is 1 second after certainly is staged in that kind of a dystopian world. And it is fiction, right? So, I mean, you can only take so much for fiction, though they do say in the beginning that their attempt was that it was educational. It's prehistory, they said. You know, there's a warning in the front that our government hasn't taken actions to harden our grid, harden our systems against EMP attack. So they wrote the book to paint a dark picture as sort of a warning what could actually happen. And there are multiple books in the series. I think I have the first 3. I haven't jumped into the last one yet. I'll have to get into that. That's the reconstitution of the country. So 1 second after they go into a lot of dark places, I'd say it's much darker than, say, something like October Fall, which is also part of an EMP series, and they did a bunch of different stories on it, taking it from different perspectives, the idea of an EMP attack. But 1 second after is set in sort of a small town in the mountains. The EMP hits, and we've got our main character who's an ex-military guy. He sort of figures out right away what's going on. It's a situation where all the cars have stopped, everything's stopped, power's out, grid's down, phones don't work, nothing works. So he walks home and he starts figuring out, okay, you know, something happened, right? It's probably an EMP attack, most likely happened. Was it a nuclear attack? Is there a war? And that's the thing. If an EMP hits, we're talking life after EMP, you're not going to have communications. You're not going to have the internet. You're probably not going to have radio. You're not going to have TV. You won't really know what's going on in the world because everything's shut down. And they do get some radio communications and whatnot later on, but likely right away you're cut off. So if we're sitting here in my backyard, how do I know if World War III happened? Right? How do you know? How do you know if it didn't hit you and I'm not in a strike area, and neither was the guy in the book because they were up in the mountains? You don't know what's going on anymore. So the first thing that's going to hit you is silence, right? Lack of information, lack of road noise, no planes flying overhead, everything just gets really quiet, and you kind of hit that slow apocalypse. And this book definitely digs into the idea of the slow apocalypse, in that, you know, there's food in the grocery store, but what happens when that's gone? There's no resupplies. So all of a sudden, in this, it's a community, right? There's the mountain community. They come together and they try to form a community and survive together. And there are some preppers in the story. It's not really about preppers, it's just about surviving in that situation, right? There's no more going to the grocery store to buy food, and there's no more going to the gas station to get gas. And they talk a lot about people with health conditions that require constant treatment. They're not getting that treatment, so a lot of people are passing away that might otherwise not if they had their insulin or whatever else it is that they need. People that need the psych meds, all that kind of stuff, people aren't getting their medicine anymore. So there's a lot of people passing away, and the people that are still there are struggling to survive because they don't have their normal food sources. So you kind of get that sense, if an EMP were to hit, you could do some things to prepare, right? Not saying you should obsess over the possibility of an EMP attack and dedicate your life to surviving it, but they give you that sense that having some food put away, having some water put away, learning to be self-sufficient, which is something we're always trying to do, would give you an edge. It's not going to guarantee your survival when 9 out of 10 people aren't going to make it the first year, but this book really gets into that, right? A lot of pretty dark stuff, as you could imagine, trying to restore order in a town. Like who gets to decide who's in charge when you're isolated and cut off from the world? Well, Is there still a government? You don't even know, right? There's maybe been a massive nuclear attack, maybe it was an EMP, there's no government. Is there still a legal system? Are there still courts? What do you do about those kind of things, right? Is it martial law? Is it they have cannibal gangs? I may have mentioned the cannibals. You know, you get a point where the government's trying to get restored, but then do you trust the new government? Do you have to listen to the new government? It's not the old government. You didn't sign up for any for that. You didn't vote for any of these people, right? So you can imagine the chaos in some kind of post-EMP world. And this book certainly, this series gets into it. It's very dark in a lot of ways that I'm not even going to begin to describe. But it is an interesting story. It's an interesting thought experiment of what life would be like if something like that happened. And then we got October Falls. October Falls, I would say, is a little more fun. This follows a prepper, and it actually opens up, both the books open up with the EMP hits, power goes out, what do you do? And in this case, the main character in the story was a prepper and was very prepared, and they reference back to that a lot. Like, I'm glad I was a prepper, I'm glad I was a prepper. So if you want a very pro-prepper book, October Falls will get you there. He had a lot of the preps. They did everything right. He had the food, he had the water, he had all of his night vision and electronic stuff that you would need in Faraday cages, and it all survived, and he had a vehicle that would still work after the EMP hit, and I know that's debatable, and that's fine. But in the story, they did everything right. They pulled the community together. He had a group of preppers he was working with. They pulled together. Eventually, they bugged out of town. He had relatives with a country estate, right? They were out in the country, and they had cattle, and they build their community out in the country, and there are battles, right? They have to battle other groups. Once again, if EMP hits, unlike, say, a nuclear war, everybody's still alive, right? All the people are still here. It's just all of a sudden we can't get supplies. So that's one of the things to think about. Once again, I don't want people to be obsessed or stressed about this their whole lives. It may never happen. It certainly never happened before. Doesn't mean it can't happen. Doesn't mean we're not slowly moving forward in that direction. But there's a lot of people around, right? And all those people are just standing around just like you are, like, now what? Nothing works anymore. Oh, and where am I going to get dinner? Where's the food coming from? So you have to deal with that. You're going to have to figure out how to deal with other people. Your neighbor's going to knock on your door and say, hey, do you have any food? And how are you going to respond to that? Nope, sorry, we don't have any food here. Sure wish we did. How about you, right? Or are you going to band together as a community and try to survive? And you're going to find groups coming in wanting to take your stuff, right? And how quickly that'll happen if an EMP were to hit is debatable. And both of these stories tell very different stories about how quickly civilization collapses, how quickly groups like raiders and thieves and cannibals start coming into the communities looking for food, looking for supplies. And as I mentioned, we tie it back to reality. There was the big grid down in Venezuela, and it happened almost immediately. What I'm describing happened almost immediately. It wasn't an EMP, but it was good enough for them in that all the power was out, right? People know the power's out, so, you know, and you see preppers saying this, power's out. Well, if there's a grid down, if there's an EMP, first thing I'm doing is going to the grocery store and supplying up. Like, well, that's looting, and you're going to be looting with everyone else that's looting, and that's going to be dangerous, right? I'm not saying don't do you, right? You do what you need to do to survive. Everyone is going to be doing what they need to do to survive, and that could get very dark. And once the grocery stores are empty and all the food people have in their houses is gone, maybe you have a year or two's worth of food, but there's a lot of people around, and those people are going to be looking for food, looking for your food, trying to figure out why you're not starving. So things would get very dark very quickly if anything like that happened. And you've got the fictional stories, which you can learn from, right? You can learn from fiction in that this is someone creating an idea of what might happen, right? It doesn't mean that everything they say is right because it's a fictional book, but they can throw out ideas just like we're trying to do with these videos, throw out ideas. You might think, that sort of makes sense. That seems theoretically possible. If this happened, hey, maybe I'd want some night vision glasses, or maybe I'd want self-defense things, and maybe I'd want the food and the medicine stored away just in case this kind of thing could happen, right? So what would life be like after nuclear apocalypse, like The Road, that's pretty dark, right? That is a dark book of nothing good going on, right? Everything is shut down. The sky is clouded over, nothing grows, very little left alive. So that's super dark, versus something like this that was almost sort of upbeat in that you have an EMP, but all the main characters are prepared. And incidentally, I'm going to ruin the book a little bit. The main character, despite being prepared and part of a community and well-fed and well-armed, he didn't live very long, right? So that is a certain reality. Live by the sword, die by the sword, and they die by the sword. So something to think about. Either enjoy the fiction, think about what would happen. It is a real possibility. I can't put odds on it. I can't tell you if it's 10%, 50%, 90%. Nobody can. Maybe the people that have the weapons know if they're actually intending on using them or not. We don't know. Something to think about, maybe something to prepare for, or at least dig into the fiction on it. So, as always, thank you for watching, and we appreciate you.